My name is Ashley Wilson, and at 29, I watched my family turn my wedding day into a nightmare of manipulation. They had no idea my grandfather Mason, anticipating their schemes, had safely hidden the real will. As Ryan and I escaped to our Maldives honeymoon, I held the ultimate truth. Before I share how justice was served, tell me where you're watching from. Like, subscribe, and comment if you face toxic family. What happened next will shock you. Growing up, my life was a clash of two worlds. My grandfather Mason was kind, principled, and genuinely wealthy in both money and wisdom. On the other hand, my parents, James and Corinne, and my sister Natalie, valued only the status and luxury the Wilson name brought. I noticed the difference early on. While my parents threw lavish parties at their suburban mansion and Natalie paraded designer clothes, my grandfather lived modestly on a beautiful lake property. Despite owning successful businesses, Mason preferred simplicity. "Money's just a tool, Ash," he'd say during our fishing trips. "It's what you build with it that matters." Those weekends became my sanctuary, teaching me to value substance over appearance. By 25, when I became an environmental lawyer, the chasm between my values and my family's was vast. My parents thought my career wasted my education. "You could make 3 times more in corporate law," my father argued. "The Wilson name should be on downtown buildings, not protest signs," my mother added, disapproving of my practical clothes. Natalie, 2 years younger, always positioned as the sensible one, followed my father into investment banking. "At least one of us understands appearance," she'd say, showing off her latest luxury. Grandfather Mason, however, was incredibly proud. "You're fighting for something bigger than yourself," he'd say. "That's the true Wilson legacy." 3 years ago, I met Ryan Mitchell at a hospital fundraiser, and the divide widened further. Ryan, a 35-year-old pediatric surgeon, came from a blue-collar background. He worked through medical school on scholarships, choosing pediatrics because kids deserve champions, even if it paid less. His warm eyes, genuine laugh, and strong moral compass immediately drew me in. My family's reaction was predictably shallow. "A surgeon is acceptable, I suppose," my mother commented after our first dinner, "but pediatric? Hardly profitable." My father was blunter. "He drives a Honda, Ashley." "A 5-year-old Honda. What will people think?" Natalie didn't even try to be subtle. "He's cute, but you could do so much better in our circles." Bradford Taylor's family owns half of downtown. But Grandfather Mason saw in Ryan what I did. During the holidays, while my parents showed off their wine, I found Mason and Ryan deep in conversation on the back porch. "That young man understands value," Mason told me later. "He reminds me of your grandmother's brother. Salt of the earth, clear vision of what matters." As my relationship with Ryan grew serious, Grandfather Mason's health declined. At 84, his heart was weakening. During my visits, he became more reflective. "Family isn't always what we're born into, Ash," he told me 3 months before our wedding. "Sometimes it's what we build for ourselves." 2 weeks later, he asked me to come to the lake house alone. In his study, surrounded by books and fishing photos, he spoke of his estate for the first time. "There are things I need to arrange," he said, his voice weak but his eyes sharp. "Things I need to protect." I tried to change the subject, uncomfortable, but he insisted. "I've watched how they treat you, Ashley. I've watched how they treat Ryan. I need you to trust me in the coming months." "Can you do that?" I promised, though I didn't fully understand. Mason passed peacefully in his sleep 3 months before our wedding. The family gathered for the will reading by his attorney, Brett Jenkins. To everyone's surprise, the preliminary will divided the estate equally among my parents, Natalie, and me. "That's strange," I whispered to Ryan. He always talked about donations to the children's hospital and conservation groups. Ryan squeezed my hand. "Maybe there's more to this," he said, sensing something was off. We didn't realize how dramatically my family's behavior would change after that reading, culminating in the destruction of what should have been our happiest day. The shift in my family's attitude toward Ryan after the will reading was sudden and suspicious. My mother, who'd called him that doctor with the economy car, now addressed him with practiced warmth as our future son-in-law. My father started inviting Ryan to golf, and Natalie, who'd ignored him for 2 years, actually followed him on social media. They're trying, Ryan said optimistically, driving home after Sunday dinner a week later. Maybe your grandfather's passing gave them perspective. I wasn't convinced. They've never tried before. Why now? The answer came clear the next day when my mother called, announcing she'd reserved the country club for our reception. But, Mom, we already put a deposit on the botanical gardens, I reminded her. Ryan and I want something simple and natural. Oh, darling, she replied dismissively. The gardens are lovely for photos, but hardly appropriate for a Wilson wedding. Besides, the country club had a cancellation, and I've already paid the non-refundable deposit. Your father would be so disappointed. This was just the beginning. Over the next 2 months, every decision Ryan and I made was systematically undermined. Our simple invitations were, accidentally, never sent. Instead, my mother ordered ornate, gold-embossed cards costing 3 times as much. My bridal boutique appointment was forgotten, replaced by a private showing at an exclusive salon where she'd already picked a ball gown, the opposite of my desired simple sheath. Our intimate guest list of 120 was misplaced, replaced by my parents' version with over 300 people, many I barely knew. Strangely, several of Ryan's close relatives and friends were missing. Must have been an oversight, my mother insisted. We'll add them right away. Somehow, the correct invitations never reached Ryan's family. Our chosen farm-to-table caterer was informed we'd changed our minds. In their place, my father hired the city's most expensive caterer, featuring imported delicacies that would make Ryan's working-class parents uncomfortable contributing. Your father is paying for everything now, my mother explained. It's his gift. Ryan's parents shouldn't worry. What seemed like generosity was a power move, stripping us of control and diminishing Ryan's family's role. 6 weeks before the wedding, I stopped by my parents' house and heard laughter upstairs. Following the sound, I froze in the doorway of the guest room. Natalie, wearing the wedding dress my mother had pushed on me, twirled while my mother applauded. It looks better on you than it will on her, my mother said. Maybe after the divorce we can alter it for your wedding to someone appropriate. They hadn't seen me. I stepped back, heart pounding. How long do we have to pretend to like him? Natalie asked. My mother's voice was cold. Your father thinks a year is sufficient. Enough time for Ashley to come to her senses, or for us to convince her that a man from his background won't fit into our world. Did you see his mother's shoes at the engagement dinner? Department store, I'm certain. I slipped out, called Ryan, in tears, and met him at our apartment. As I recounted what I'd heard, his face grew serious. I've been noticing things too, he admitted. Your father took me to lunch last week and talked the entire time about prenuptial agreements and how they can be contested. It felt like a warning. That night, discussing everything since Mason's death, a disturbing pattern emerged. My family wasn't just taking over our wedding. They were actively trying to sabotage our relationship. Something's off about your grandfather's will too, Ryan pointed out. He was specific about his wishes, about provisions for the children's hospital. You're right, I realized. And he mentioned conservation trusts for the lake property. None of that was in the will. Despite our growing suspicions, we were weeks from the wedding, deposits paid, arrangements finalized. Ryan, ever the voice of reason, suggested we proceed but remain vigilant. If they're playing a long game, we need to be strategic, he said, holding me close. Let's document everything. Your grandfather trusted you for a reason, Ash. Maybe we need to trust his plan, whatever it was. Little did we know how ugly things would get before the truth emerged. The morning of our wedding arrived with perfect weather, but a growing sense of dread in my stomach. I'd barely slept, haunted by dreams of my grandfather trying to tell me something I couldn't quite hear. My mother and Natalie arrived at the bridal suite at 9 a.m., bringing a hairstylist and makeup artist I'd never met. But I already booked Shannon, I protested, referring to the bohemian stylist whose natural approach I loved. She called. With a family emergency, my mother dismissed. Luckily, Genevieve was available. She does all the society brides. 2 hours later, I barely recognized myself. My hair was pulled into a severe updo that made my neck ache, and my makeup was so heavy I felt like I was wearing a mask. "It's perfect for photographs," my mother insisted. "Trust me, darling, I know what works for the Wilson face shape." As the bridesmaids, mostly Natalie's friends whom she'd insisted I include, arrived for champagne, I retreated to the bathroom to text Ryan. His response was immediate. "No matter what they do, by sunset you'll be my wife. That's all that matters. I love you." With renewed determination, I emerged to find Natalie rummaging through my wedding folder. "What are you doing?" I asked, noticing my carefully written vows were missing. "Just making sure everything's in order," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, and I've been meaning to give you this." She handed me a small velvet pouch. Inside was my grandmother's sapphire pendant, something I'd mentioned wanting for my something blue. "That's surprisingly thoughtful," I said cautiously. Natalie's smile widened. "Well, it is your wedding day. Even I can be nice once a year." The ceremony was set for 4 p.m. at 3 o'clock. As I was squeezed into the massive ball gown, my father knocked. "Princess, I have a wonderful surprise," he announced, unusually pleased. "We're announcing it at the reception, but I wanted you to hear it first. Your mother and I are selling the lake house." My heart sank. Grandfather's lake house. But that property has been in the family for generations. It's where he taught me to fish, where we had all our special talks. "It's just a house, Ashley," my father said firmly. "The developer is offering well above market value. They're building luxury condos. It's what your grandfather would have wanted, maximizing the investment." It was so blatantly false that I couldn't even respond. Mason had fought against lakefront development his entire life, even establishing a conservation group. "I need a moment alone," I managed, my voice shaking. "Don't wrinkle the dress," my mother called as I closed the bathroom door. Alone, I fought back tears that would ruin my makeup. Something about Natalie's pendant felt wrong. Examining it closely, I realized it was a replica. The original had a small chip from when my grandmother accidentally dropped it. This stone was flawless. A knock interrupted me. It was my cousin Heather, the only family member I'd insisted on including. "Your vows," she whispered, handing me a folded paper. Natalie switched them. "These are the real ones from your folder." "What did she replace them with?" Heather grimaced. "Pages from your teenage diary. The entries about your crush on Justin Phillips from 10th grade." Before I could process this latest sabotage, it was time to line up. As I took my father's arm, he leaned in. "Try to look happier. We have important clients watching." The ceremony was a blur. I focused entirely on Ryan's face, his steady gaze, his gentle hands as we exchanged rings, his unwavering voice promising to stand by me. If he was bothered by the ostentatious surroundings, he never showed it. Things truly fell apart at the reception. Ryan's parents, brother, and closest friends were seated at tables in a far corner, obscured by a column. My family and their social circle occupied the premium tables. The first sign of trouble came during appetizers when a waiter told Ryan's mother her special meal for dietary restrictions was unavailable. "But we confirmed it 3 times, she said, embarrassed. The waiter shrugged. "The order was changed yesterday. I can bring you a side salad." Then came the speeches. As maid of honor, Natalie took the microphone with a predatory smile. "For those who don't know me, I'm the sister who got the stylish jeans," she began, eliciting uncomfortable laughter. "Ashley and I have always been different. While I was winning beauty pageants, she was saving worms from puddles. While I was dating the quarterback, she was organizing petitions for the school cafeteria to use less plastic." What followed was 10 minutes of thinly veiled insults disguised as sisterly teasing, including embarrassing childhood stories I'd specifically asked her not to mention. "And now she's landed a doctor," Natalie concluded with a wink. "Not a plastic surgeon or a specialist with private patients, but still, at least he's a doctor. To Ashley and Ryan, may your love of economy cars and second-hand furniture bring you happiness in your cozy little future." As she sat down to scattered applause, my father stood, already slightly drunk from the scotch he'd been drinking. When my Ashley told us she was dating a doctor, I had high hopes, he began, skipping any warm introduction. I pictured summer, homes and charity galas. Then we met Ryan, and well,
He chuckled, raising his glass. At least he's a doctor.
I felt Ryan stiffen beside me. My father continued, in all seriousness, the Mitchells may not be used to our way of life, but we welcome them. Who knows? Maybe some of our standards will rub off and Ryan will finally upgrade that Honda. As forced laughter rippled, I watched Ryan's parents exchange pained glances. His father, a hard-working electrician who'd sacrificed everything, looked down at his plate. I'm so sorry, I whispered to Ryan. Not your fault, he replied, jaw tight. But I'm starting to think your grandfather was trying to warn you about something bigger than wedding sabotage. During the awkward dinner, I excused myself. Passing the coat check, I saw my father's suit jacket. On instinct, I checked the inside pocket and found a folded document. Partially pulling it out, I saw my grandfather's law firm letterhead and fragments of what seemed to be a torn will, different from the one read after his death. Before I could examine it further, I heard voices approaching and quickly pushed it back. Ducking into an alcove, I overheard my parents and sister. The prenup might be solid, but there are always ways around these things, my father was saying. After seeing how pathetic his family is, I'm more convinced than ever he's after the Wilson money. Did you see his mother's face during your speech? Natalie laughed, like a deer in headlights. These people don't belong in our world. Once the honeymoon is over, we'll start working on Ashley, my mother added. A few months of subtle comments about differences in upbringing, some well-placed concerns about their compatibility. She'd be filing for divorce by their first anniversary. And if not, my father muttered, there's always the real will to consider. Brett knows what to do if she doesn't come to her senses. Their voices faded as they returned. I stood, frozen, pieces clicking into place. There was another will. My family knew. And somehow they'd convinced Brett Jenkins, my grandfather's trusted lawyer, to participate. I rushed to find Ryan, my elaborate dress wrestling me as I moved through the crowded reception. He stood alone near the gift table, watching the dance floor with a strained expression. We need to leave, I said urgently. Now, I'll explain everything, but we need to go. One look at my face told him all he needed. Without hesitation, he nodded. Lead the way. In the chaos, no one noticed as the bride and groom slipped out. Ryan's Honda, the same one my father mocked, waited, adorned with just married decorations his brother surprised us with. In any other circumstance, it would have made me smile. Now it represented escape. The lake house, I said as Ryan started the engine. We need to go to grandfather's lake house before they sell it. Are you sure? What about our flight to the Maldives tomorrow? Trust me, I insisted, already pulling pins from my painful updo. I think grandfather left something there for us to find. As we drove, I explained everything, the torn wool glimpsed in my father's pocket, the conversation I'd overheard, and the suspicion that my family had manipulated my grandfather's wishes. That would explain why the will reading seemed so out of character, Ryan said, navigating the winding road. No specific bequests, no charitable donations, just an equal split. It didn't sound like Mason at all. The lake house stood silent and serene. Using my key, we entered the familiar space that smelled of old books and pine. We need to check his study, I said, kicking off my uncomfortable heels and hiking up my voluminous skirt. That's where he kept everything important. Mason's study remained exactly as he'd left it. Ryan and I began a methodical search. What exactly are we looking for? Ryan asked after 30 fruitless minutes. I don't know, I admitted. Frustration mounting. A document, a letter, something that explains what's going on. I sank into my grandfather's leather chair, the absurdity hitting me, still in my wedding dress. Married less than 6 hours, searching for hidden secrets. Instead of celebrating. He would have put it somewhere I would think to look, I reasoned aloud. Somewhere that had meaning to us. My eyes fell on the fishing photograph above the fireplace. Mason and me holding a trophy bass from the summer I turned 16. It was a significant catch because I'd insisted on using my own hand-tied fly against his advice. Sometimes you have to trust your own instincts, even when more experienced people tell you otherwise, he'd said when my unconventional approach worked. That's the mark of true wisdom, Ash. I walked to the photograph, lifting it carefully. Behind it was a small wall safe I'd never seen. Ryan, I called, heart racing. I need a combination. Ryan joined me, examining the dial. Any ideas? I thought, then tried my birth date. Nothing. My grandmother's birthday. Still nothing. What about the date you caught that fish? Ryan suggested. I smiled at his perception. June 16th, the year I turned 16. I dialed June 16th, 16, and the safe clicked open. Inside were a sealed envelope, a flash drive, and a legal document titled Last Will and Testament of Mason James Wilson. With trembling hands, I removed all 3 items. You should read the letter first, Ryan suggested. The envelope was addressed simply to Ashley in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. Breaking the seal, I began to read aloud. My dearest Ashley, if you're reading this, then you've likely discovered that things aren't as they seemed at the official reading of my will. I apologize for the deception, but after a lifetime of observing your parents' and sister's behavior, I knew I needed to take precautions. The document you found in the safe is my true will. The version Brett Jenkins read to the family was part of a test, one that, sadly, I predicted your family would fail. Brett has instructions to reveal the truth 1 month after your wedding unless you contact him sooner using the phrase, "The bass flies in June." I wanted to see how your family would behave when they believed they would receive equal shares of my estate. Would they finally accept Ryan? Would they respect your wedding wishes? Would they show the character I've spent decades hoping they might develop? I suspect, since you're reading this before your honeymoon, that they've shown their true colors. The flash drive contains video documentation of conversations I had with your father in the months before my passing. Conversations where he revealed plans to manipulate you and your inheritance once I was gone. Ashley, I've watched you grow into a woman of principle and compassion. In Ryan, you found a partner who shares those values. The 2 of you understand what true wealth is, and it has nothing to do with country clubs or imported sports cars. The lake house is yours, as is the majority of my estate. I've established trusts for the children's hospital where Ryan works, and for the conservation of the lake that gave us so many perfect days. Your parents and Natalie will receive modest trusts, enough to prevent a successful contest of the will, but not enough to fund the lifestyle to which they believe they're entitled. Trust Brett Jenkins. Despite what appearances may suggest, he has been following my instructions precisely. When you contact him, he will explain everything and begin the process of executing my true wishes. Remember our fishing trips, remember our talks, and know that I am so proud of the person you've become. Ryan is the partner you deserve. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. All my love, grandfather. Tears streamed down my face. Ryan, his own eyes damp, squeezed my hand.
He knew, I whispered. He knew exactly what they would do.
Mason was protecting you, Ryan said softly. He was making sure you wouldn't be manipulated or controlled. We opened the will next, confirming everything the letter described. The lake house and 60% of Mason's considerable estate were left to me. Substantial donations were directed to the children's hospital and local conservation efforts. My parents and Natalie each received trusts providing modest annual incomes, comfortable but far from luxurious. The flash drive contained video recordings of several meetings between my grandfather and my father in the months before Mason's death. In one particularly damning clip, my father was clearly heard discussing plans to guide Ashley toward more suitable matches and ensure the Wilson fortune stays within the right circles once my grandfather was gone. We can use Ryan's background against him, my father had said callously. No prenup is unbreakable if you have the right leverage. My grandfather had simply nodded, allowing my father to reveal his true character while the hidden camera recorded everything. As the reality settled over us, Ryan pulled me into his arms, my elaborate wedding dress crinkling between us. What do you want to do now?
He asked, always respectful of my agency, even in crisis.
I took a deep breath, sudden clarity washing over me. First, we're going on our honeymoon. We deserve that much. While we're in the Maldives, we'll contact Brett Jenkins with the code phrase and set everything in motion. Ryan smiled. From the Maldives, that seems fitting somehow. They tried to ruin today, I said, determination replacing my distress. But they don't get to ruin our marriage or our future. We spent that night at the lake house, sleeping in the guest room that had always been mine. The next morning, still in yesterday's clothes, we drove to our apartment, quickly packed for our honeymoon, and headed to the airport, ignoring the dozens of missed calls and messages from my family. As our plane lifted off, I felt a weight lifting too. Whatever confrontation awaited us upon our return, we would face it together, with the truth and my grandfather's wisdom firmly on our side. The transition from wedding disaster to tropical paradise was surreal. One day I was fleeing my own reception in a massive ball gown. The next, I was walking barefoot on pristine white sand, the Indian Ocean stretching endlessly before me in shades of turquoise and azure. Our overwater bungalow offered privacy and breathtaking beauty, the perfect setting to process everything and plan our next steps. On our first morning as the sun rose, Ryan and I sat on our deck with coffee, Mason's letter between us. The phrase is, "The base flies in June," I reminded myself, reaching for my phone. I should call Brett now while it's still business. Hours back home. Ryan nodded, taking my free hand as I dialed Jenkins' legal services. After identifying myself, I was quickly connected to Brett's private line. "Ashley," he answered immediately, his voice a mix of relief and concern.
I've
"Been hoping you call. Are you safe? Your parents have been telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown at the reception." "I'm fine, Brett. I'm with Ryan in the Maldives." I took a deep breath. "The base flies in June." There was a moment of silence, then an audible sigh. "Thank God. Mason said you'd figure it out." "Where did you find it?" "The lake house." "Yes, behind the fishing photo. Perfect. That means you have the true will and the evidence." I've been maintaining the charade as Mason instructed, but it hasn't been easy. "Your father has already begun the process to contest the preliminary will, demanding a larger share and accelerated distribution of assets." This news, while shocking, only confirmed what we'd discovered. "They're trying to sell the lake house, Brett. My father announced it during our reception." "They can't sell what they don't own," Brett assured me. The lake house was transferred into a separate trust 6 months before Mason's passing. They've been speaking with a real estate agent who's actually working for me, another part of Mason's plan to see how far they would go. The intricate layers of my grandfather's foresight were remarkable. He'd anticipated every move and prepared countermeasures. "What happens now?" I asked. Brett's voice became professional. "With your authorization, I'll begin executing the true will. The video evidence will be crucial if your family contests, which I expect they will. I'll need you to document everything that happened with the wedding as well. All the instances of sabotage, the conversations you overheard, everything. They'll say it's just family disagreements over wedding plans," Ryan pointed out, leaning close to the phone. "How do we prove malicious intent?" "Mason thought of that too," Brett replied. "Start contacting your original vendors, the ones your family canceled or changed. Get written statements about who contacted them and what was said. I've already been quietly gathering evidence of your parents' financial activities since Mason's death. They've been quite busy making plans for money they don't actually have." After arranging to send Brett all necessary documentation securely, we ended the call with a plan. For the next 3 days, between swims in crystal clear waters and dinners under the stars, Ryan and I methodically documented everything we could remember about the wedding sabotage. The wedding planner confirmed via email that she'd received a call from Corinne Wilson claiming I'd changed my mind. The botanical garden venue manager forwarded an email from my father canceling our reservation, citing my dissatisfaction. The farm-to-table caterer sent a copy of the cancellation form signed by my mother using my name. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of deliberate interference and deception. But it wasn't until the 4th day of our honeymoon that we discovered how far my family's betrayal had gone. "Ashley, you need to see this," Ryan called from the bungalow while I was reading on the deck. His tone made me rush inside. On his laptop screen was an email from his brother Mike with an attachment, a social media post from Natalie. It showed a clearly photoshopped image of me crying hysterically at the reception with the caption, "When the stress of marrying down finally hits. Prayers for my sister as she gets the help she needs. Hashtag mental health awareness, hashtag family first." Accompanying the screenshot was a message from Mike. This is all over their social circles. "Your in-laws are telling everyone you had a nervous breakdown and Ryan took advantage by rushing you away from people who could help. They've been to your apartment building twice, trying to convince the manager to let them in for a wellness check." My hands trembled as I scrolled through more screenshots. My mother had posted a somber request for privacy during this difficult family time. My father had given a quote to the local society page claiming I'd been under tremendous pressure, and that they were working with medical professionals to ensure my well-being. They're trying to build a case that I'm mentally unstable, I realized, ice forming in my stomach. If they can convince people I'm not competent to make my own decisions, they could challenge your inheritance on grounds of mental
Capacity, Ryan finished, his medical background making the strategy instantly clear. It's despicable, but clever.
I called Brett immediately, forwarding all the screenshots as we spoke. "I was just about to contact you," he said grimly. "They've escalated faster than even Mason anticipated. Your father came to my office yesterday with a psychiatric consultant discussing options for an evaluation when you return." "Can they force that?" I asked, panic rising. "No," Brett assured me. "You're a competent adult with no history of mental illness. But they're building a narrative, and if they can get enough people to express concerns about your behavior, they could make things very difficult," Ryan concluded. Brett cleared his throat. "There's more. They've hired a private investigator to look into Ryan's background. Your father specifically asked him to focus on financial irregularities and prior relationships." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. "I have nothing to hide, but the invasion of privacy is unacceptable." "I agree," Brett said. "Which is why I think we need to accelerate our timeline. I've prepared all the necessary documentation to execute Mason's true will. With your permission, I'd like to move forward immediately rather than waiting for your return," we agreed without hesitation. Before ending the call, Brett added one final piece of advice. "Document everything. Keep a journal of all communications from your family. Record phone calls if legally permitted. The more evidence we have of their behavior, the stronger our position will be." That night, as if on cue, the calls began. First, my mother, her voice tearful and concerned. "Darling, we're so worried. Whatever you think we did, we can work through it as a family. Please come home and let us help you." Then my father, authoritative and commanding, "This childish behavior ends now, Ashley. You're a Wilson, and Wilsons don't air family disagreements in public. Return home immediately or there will be consequences." Finally, Natalie, her message, dripping with false sympathy. "Sis, everyone understands the pressure got to you. No one's judging. Just ditch the doctor and come home. Daddy's already talking to divorce attorneys who can keep this all quiet." I recorded each call, maintaining calm, non-committal responses that revealed nothing of our plans. After the third call, Ryan suggested we extend our stay for a few extra days, giving Brett more time to execute the will and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. "The resort has availability," he noted, "and we're safer here, away from their influence and potential manipulations." I agreed, grateful once again for his steady presence and clear thinking. We contacted the airline and settled in for an extended stay in paradise, though one now tinged with strategic planning and legal preparations. Over the next 4 days, Brett worked tirelessly back home, sending daily encrypted updates. The true will had been officially filed with the probate court. The preliminary will had been withdrawn with a formal explanation of its purpose as a test of character. The video evidence had been secured with multiple authenticated copies. Meanwhile, my family grew increasingly desperate. "We've spoken with Dr. Lewis about residential treatment options," my mother texted. "Very discreet, very comfortable. We can handle all the arrangements." Ryan's background check raised several concerns. my father claimed in a voicemail, not specifying any actual findings. We're only trying to protect you from a serious mistake. Your mental health exemption for the prenup is already being prepared, Natalie wrote, revealing their assumption they could invalidate my marriage. No one will ever know. Each message, call, and text became another piece of evidence documenting their true intentions. What they didn't realize was that while they were building a false narrative about my mental state, they were simultaneously creating a perfect record of their own manipulation and deception. On our final night in the Maldives, Ryan and I sat on our deck under a canopy of stars, the gentle sound of waves providing a peaceful backdrop. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Ryan asked, his fingers intertwined with mine. I considered the question carefully. I'm sad that it has to be this way. They're still my family, despite everything, but I'm ready for the truth to come out. I'm ready to honor grandfather's wishes and start our life together without their interference. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Your grandfather saw this coming long before we did. He tried to give them chances to change, to see beyond money and status, and they failed every test. Now they have to face the consequences, I concluded. As the tropical night enveloped us, I felt a strange mixture of grief and determination. The family I'd grown up with had revealed themselves to be people I couldn't trust or respect. Yet through that painful revelation, my bond with Ryan had only strengthened, and my connection to my grandfather's legacy had deepened. Tomorrow we fly home, I said, resting my head on Ryan's shoulder, and we end this on our terms. On Mason's terms, Ryan corrected gently. He's still looking out for you, even now. The thought brought tears to my eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude for the true family bonds that transcended even death. Whatever confrontation awaited us, we would face it with the strength of those bonds guiding us forward. Our return flight landed on a crisp autumn afternoon, the seasonal change mirroring the transformation in our lives. Brett Jenkins was waiting. At the arrival gate, his familiar figure a welcome sight. Welcome home, he greeted us warmly. Everything is in place for tomorrow's meeting. Your family believes it's about accelerating the distribution of assets from the preliminary will. They have no idea what's actually coming. The three of us drove directly to Brett's office, spending hours reviewing documents, practicing responses, and finalizing our strategy. Brett had reserved a conference room at his firm, a neutral territory where we'd have the advantage. Get some rest tonight, he advised. Tomorrow will be emotionally challenging, but legally we're on solid ground. Ryan and I checked into a hotel rather than our apartment, uncertain if my family might be monitoring our home. That night, sleep came fitfully as my mind rehearsed various scenarios. Morning arrived with a clarity that comes from absolute certainty. As I dressed in a professional navy suit, a world away from the ornate wedding gown, I felt my grandfather's strength flowing through me. We arrived at Jenkins Legal Services 30 minutes early. Brett had arranged the conference room strategically, a large oval table with Ryan and me beside him at the head, facing the door. A projection screen was set up behind us, its contents hidden. In an adjacent room, 2 court reporters and a videographer waited. Your family just arrived in the lobby, Brett's assistant informed us at precisely 10 a.m. Shall the first send them up? Brett nodded, his expression professional but determined. It's time. The door opened moments later, revealing my parents and sister, impeccably dressed and wearing expressions of concern. Superiority that faltered momentarily when they saw me sitting calmly beside Ryan. Ashley, darling. My mother rushed forward, arms outstretched. We've been so worried. Please take your seats, Brett interrupted smoothly. We have a great deal to discuss, and I've scheduled exactly 90 minutes for this meeting. My father's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What is the meaning of this setup, Brett? I thought we were here to discuss accelerating the asset distribution. In a manner of speaking, we are, Brett replied, gesturing again to the chairs. Please sit down so we can begin. Once they were seated, looking increasingly wary, Brett opened a folder. Before we proceed, I need to inform you that this meeting is being recorded with video and stenography, standard for matters of significant estate execution. He gestured toward the discrete cameras. Do I have everyone's acknowledgement and consent? My family exchanged glances before my father reluctantly agreed. I noted the momentary flash of worry in his eyes, the first crack in his confident facade. Excellent, Brett continued, now to business. I've called this meeting to execute the final will and testament of Mason James Wilson. We've already done that, Natalie interjected impatiently, 3 months ago. That's why we're here, to speed up the distribution. Brett smiled thinly. I'm afraid what we reviewed 3 months ago was not Mason's final will, but rather a preliminary document designed specifically as what Mr. Wilson called a test of character. He slid copies of the true will across the table. This is Mason. Wilson's actual final will and testament, properly executed and witnessed 6 months before his passing. My father snatched the document, his face darkening as he scanned its contents. My mother peered over his shoulder, her composure slipping. Natalie grabbed her own copy, flipping pages frantically. This is preposterous. My father finally sputtered. This can't be legal. We'll contest it immediately. You're welcome to try, Brett replied calmly. But I should inform you that Mason anticipated that response. Perhaps this will clarify his intentions. He pressed a button, and the projection screen illuminated with my grandfather's face. The video began to play. James, Karen, Natalie. My grandfather's voice filled the room, strong despite his evident physical weakness. If you're watching this, then you failed the test I set for you. The preliminary will you heard was designed to reveal your true characters, to see if the prospect of equal inheritance would finally inspire you to treat Ashley and her chosen partner with the respect they deserve. My father half rose, but Brett raised a hand, silencing him. The recording continued. Ashley has demonstrated the values I tried to instill in all of you: integrity, compassion, and the understanding that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. Ryan Mitchell possesses those same qualities, which is why I welcomed him into our family when you would not. The recording detailed my grandfather's observations of their materialistic values, their dismissal of my choices, and their transparent attempts to control my life. The true will you now hold reflects my actual wishes, he concluded. Ashley will inherit the lake house property and 60% of my estate. The Children's Hospital and Lake Conservation Trust will receive substantial donations. And you three will receive modest trusts that will provide comfort without excess, perhaps giving you the opportunity to develop the character you've thus far failed to demonstrate. As the video ended, silence filled the room. My mother was the first to recover, turning to me with tears I couldn't determine were manipulative or genuine. Ashley, darling, you can't possibly want this. We're your family. This isn't about the wedding, I interrupted, finding my voice. Although what you did there was merely the culmination of a lifetime of similar behavior. I opened my own folder, removing printed emails, text messages, and vendor statements. You systematically sabotaged every aspect of our wedding day. You canceled our chosen venue. I placed the Botanical Gardens email on the table. You replaced our caterer. Another document joined the first. You deliberately excluded Ryan's family from meaningful participation. With each piece of evidence, their expressions shifted from indignant denial to a calculating assessment of their position. Typical Britazilla behavior, Natalie scoffed. Every bride thinks her wedding was sabotaged. Perhaps, Brett interjected. But not every bride has vendors willing to sign affidavits about who actually made the changes. He added a stack of notarized statements to the growing pile. Or recordings of family members discussing their intentions. He played a brief audio clip, my mother and Natalie talking about the wedding dress, the conversation I'd overheard. You were spying on us, my mother gasped, genuinely shocked. No, I happened to overhear you plotting against me, I corrected. There's a difference. My father, ever the strategist, changed tactics. This is all very dramatic, but ultimately irrelevant. Family disagreements about wedding plans don't invalidate Mason's original will. True, Brett acknowledged. But this might.
He played another video clip. My father and my grandfather study a month before Mason's death.
Once you're gone, we'll need to guide Ashley toward more appropriate choices. The Mitchell boy is a phase. Once she has access to her full inheritance, we can introduce her to men of actual substance. My grandfather's voice, weak but clear, asked, "And if she's happy with Ryan?" "Happiness is temporary," my father said. "Status and connections are permanent. Trust me, there are ways to ensure the Wilson fortune stays where it belongs." As the clip ended, my father's face was pale. "Where did you get that? You were recording private conversations." "That's illegal." "Mason recorded those conversations with full legal disclosure," Brett countered smoothly. "The camera was visible. And the room contained a posted notice of recording, a security measure he implemented years ago after several valuable items disappeared during family gatherings. You simply never bothered to notice." He turned to the stack of evidence. "We also have documentation of your attempts to build a false narrative about Ashley's mental health, your unauthorized visits to their apartment, and your consultation with psychiatric professionals about having her evaluated against her will." My mother, desperately trying to salvage the situation, turned to Ryan. "Surely you can see this is tearing the family apart. As a doctor, don't you want what's best for Ashley? A resolution that keeps everyone whole." Ryan, who had been deliberately silent, spoke with quiet authority. "What's best for Ashley is exactly what Mason wanted. Freedom from manipulation and control. As her husband, I support her completely in this. As a doctor, I recognize emotional abuse when I see it." "Emotional abuse," Natalie scoffed. "Now we're abusive because we wanted a nice wedding, because we have standards?" "No," I said firmly. "You're abusive because you've spent years undermining my choices, dismissing my values, and attempting to mold me into a version of myself that prioritizes appearance over substance, just as you did with my wedding." At that moment, the door opened, and Brett's assistant ushered in 3 people I recognized instantly: the manager of the botanical gardens, the owner of the farm-to-table catering company, and our original wedding planner. "These individuals have provided written statements," Brett explained. "But they're also prepared to testify in person about the specific instructions they received from each of you. Instructions that directly contradicted Ashley and Ryan's expressed wishes for their wedding day." My father, recognizing the mounting evidence, switched to his final negotiating position. "What will it take to end this amicably? Name a figure." The crude attempt to settle financially, treating the situation like a business deal, confirmed everything my grandfather had observed. "This isn't a negotiation," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion. "This is simply the consequence of choices you've made consistently over many years. Grandfather gave you multiple opportunities to demonstrate better character, and you failed each test." I stood up, Ryan rising beside me. "The will is legal and binding. Brett will handle all further communications regarding the estate. Any contest will only result in the public disclosure of all this evidence, something I don't think any of you want." My sister, her composure finally breaking, slammed her hand on the table. "This is so typical. Perfect Ashley, grandfathers. Favorite, getting everything while the rest of us are treated like villains in some melodrama." Her outburst seemed to trigger something in my mother, who turned sharply. "Be quiet, Natalie. Your constant antagonism toward your sister is part of what got us here. If you hadn't insisted on that ridiculous maid of honor speech, if you hadn't switched her vows with her diary entries, you told me to do that." Natalie shot back. "You said it would be a funny prank that would put her in her place. I never said to humiliate her in front of hundreds of people, and it was your idea to try on her wedding dress." My father's voice cut through their escalating argument. He turned to me, his expression hard but defeated. "You've made your point, Ashley. We underestimated you and Mason." He stood abruptly. "Come, Karen, Natalie. Our attorneys will be in touch, Brett." As they gathered their belongings, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation, watching the family I'd grown up with preparing to exit my life. At least in the controlling, omnipresent way they had always inhabited it. At the door, my father paused, turning back with one final attempt. "The lake house has been in the Wilson family for generations. Regardless of legal ownership, it's part of our shared heritage. I hope you'll consider that before making any decisions about its future. I met his gaze steadily. I will honor the property and its history the way grandfather did, by protecting it from development and preserving it for future generations, who value more than just its monetary worth. With that, they departed, leaving behind the heavy silence that follows significant endings and precedes new beginnings. Brett looked between Ryan and me. You did well, both of you. Mason would be proud. As we gathered our documentation, I felt the weight of the confrontation lifting. Whatever legal challenges might still lie ahead, the truth had been spoken. And there was no returning to the old patterns of manipulation and control. Outside Brett's office, Ryan and I stood in the autumn sunshine, facing each other in the first quiet moment we'd had since the meeting. Are you okay? He asked gently. I considered the question. Yes, I finally answered. Not happy about how things turned out with my family, but at peace with standing up for the truth. For us, Ryan smiled, that steady, reassuring smile that had been my anchor. Then let's go home, our home, and start building the life your grandfather believed in. Hand in hand, we walked toward our future, leaving behind the wreckage of old expectations and embracing the freedom to define family on our own terms. 6 months passed like turning pages in a new chapter of life. The lake house, once a weekend retreat, became our permanent home after extensive renovations that preserved its rustic charm while updating its functionality. Large windows overlooking the water now filled the space with natural light, and my grandfather's study remained largely untouched, a sanctuary of memories and wisdom. The legal aftermath unfolded much as Brett predicted. My family initially filed to contest the will but quickly retreated when their attorneys reviewed the extensive evidence. The settlement conference was brief and decisive, with my parents and sister accepting the trusts established in the true will, modest by their standards, but more than generous by any objective measure. On a perfect spring afternoon, Ryan and I hosted a small gathering on the dock. Unlike our original wedding, this vow renewal ceremony included only people who truly cared about our happiness, Ryan's parents and brother, a handful of close friends, and Brett Jenkins, who had become more than just our attorney. I take you, Ryan, as my husband once more, I said, holding his hands as the setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and amber. Not in a celebration designed by others, but in this place that represents authenticity and true values. I promise to build our life on that foundation, honoring not what others expect of us, but what we know to be meaningful and real. Ryan's vows echoed similar sentiments, his steady voice carrying across the water as fish occasionally jumped near by nature's own applause for our commitment. After the simple ceremony and intimate dinner, I found myself sitting on the dock with Sarah, Ryan's mother. Her warmth and straightforward kindness had been a healing presence. I've been meaning to tell you, she said, watching Ryan laughing with his father and brother near the fire pit. What you did standing up to your family like that, it took real courage. I shook my head slightly. It doesn't feel like courage when you have no other choice. It just feels like survival. Sarah patted my hand. That's what courage usually is, dear. Not grand gestures, just doing what needs to be done when it would be easier not to. The wisdom of her words reminded me of my grandfather, making me smile. Thank you for raising such a good man, I told her. Mason saw it immediately, Ryan's character. That's why he trusted him, trusted us. 2 weeks after our vow renewal, an unexpected email arrived from Natalie. Unlike my parents, who had maintained rigid silence, my sister's message showed the first crack in the family's united front. Ashley, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Maybe some therapy too. But don't tell Mom and Dad. I'm not ready to say I was wrong about everything because I still don't think I was. But I'm ready to admit I was wrong about Ryan and about how we handled your wedding. Seeing you at the lake house during the legal meetings, you looked different. Stronger, I guess. Not like someone having a breakdown or making a mistake, like someone who knew exactly what she wanted. I miss grandfather's lake house. I miss the person I was when we were there as kids. Before designer labels and country club memberships became my whole personality. I don't expect forgiveness or even a response. Just wanted you to know I'm thinking about things differently these days. Nat, I showed the email to Ryan that evening as we sat on the porch swing that had been my grandfather's favorite spot for watching sunsets. "What do you think?" he asked, after reading it twice. "Is it genuine?" "Parts of it," I decided after careful consideration. "The Natalie I grew up with is still in there somewhere, beneath all the social climbing and status anxiety. This feels like a first step, at least. Are you going to respond?" I nodded slowly. "I think so. Not with open arms, but with an open door. Maybe coffee somewhere neutral in a few weeks. Baby steps." My parents' response came much later and far more tentatively. A formal card on my birthday with a brief handwritten note suggesting they would welcome the opportunity to move forward as a family. No apology, no acknowledgement of past behavior, but a small olive branch nonetheless. I stored the card in my grandfather's desk drawer, neither accepting nor rejecting the overture, giving myself permission to process my feelings without rush or pressure. Meanwhile, Ryan's career flourished. Using part of the trust funds my grandfather had established for the Children's Hospital, he developed an expanded pediatric care program for underserved communities. His promotion to department head came with the freedom to implement innovative approaches to healthcare.
Access.
Mason's money is doing exactly what he hoped, Ryan told me one evening as we reviewed the program's initial success metrics. Creating change that matters, not just sustaining privilege. My own career evolved as well. I established the Wilson Environmental Foundation using a portion of my inheritance, focusing on protecting watersheds and lake ecosystems. The work connected me to my grandfather's values while allowing me to build something meaningful in his memory. 1 year after our wedding day, I stood at the end of the dock at sunset, reflecting on everything that had changed. The betrayal still stung when I allowed myself to dwell on it, but those moments came less frequently now. What remained was a deeper understanding of both family dynamics and my own resilience. Ryan joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we watched the light play across the water. "Penny for your thoughts?" he said. "I was thinking about something grandfather once told me," I replied. "He said that family isn't always what we're born into. Sometimes it's what we build for ourselves." "Wise man," Ryan agreed. "He also said that the true measure of wealth isn't what you own, but what you value." I turned in Ryan's arms to face him. "By that standard, I think we're the richest people I know." Ryan smiled, the same smile that had steadied me through every storm. "Your grandfather saw in you what I see every day. Someone who knows the difference between price and value." As darkness settled over the lake, fireflies began their nightly dance among the trees, nature's reminder that even in darkness, light finds a way to shine. We walked hand in hand back to the house that had become our sanctuary and the center of our chosen family. The journey from that disastrous wedding day to this peaceful evening had taught me lessons I would carry forever. That standing in your truth requires courage but brings freedom. That family can be redefined on your own terms. That sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as losses. And that love, when built on mutual respect and shared values, can withstand even the most elaborate attempts to undermine it. I often wonder what my grandfather would think of how everything unfolded. In my heart, I believe he would be satisfied, not with the pain the revelation caused, but with the truth and authenticity that emerged from it. His final gift wasn't just the inheritance or the lake house, but the opportunity to define my life on my own terms, free from manipulation and false expectations. As I look to the future, I am grateful for all of it, the painful revelations, the difficult confrontations, and the new beginnings they made possible. I'm grateful for Ryan's unwavering support, for Brett's principled guidance, and most of all, for my grandfather's wisdom and foresight. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that sometimes you have to lose the family you thought you had to find the family you truly need. And sometimes sending the real will from a paradise island with the person who truly loves you is the perfect way to start that process. What about you? Have you ever had to make difficult choices to protect your future happiness? Have you discovered that family is sometimes defined by love and respect rather than blood? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Your support means the world to me as I continue to share the lessons I've learned about finding authentic connections in a world that often values appearances over substance.
Thank
You for being part of my journey, and I wish you the courage to create a life that honors your own true values.